Great. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, Chief Exec of the English Association, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to this session this afternoon, which is part of our regular online Twilight CPD event programme. Just a quick word about the English Association. We are a learner society and subject association, which was founded in 1906 to promote, support and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through to secondary and further education, to higher education and beyond, and we cover all parts of the discipline across language, literature, linguistics, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to our speakers for coming along this evening and giving your time so generously. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying us their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £55 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Right, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth to take things forward. Thank you.
Hello and welcome everyone to our Technology in the English Classroom Policy, Practice and Pedagogy event, which is based on the newsletter, the recent newsletter with exactly that same title. And we're delighted to have some of the contributors here today to discuss their pieces and also hopefully to open up into a discussion with all of you here. The newsletter offered, as I hope some of you, if not all of you, have read it, different perspectives and teaching experiences on trying to understand the consequences and the effects of using AI and technology in the English classroom. And so I'm going to invite at this point to open up the conversation about this, which is the purpose of the newsletter, and to extend it even further into this event. I'm going to invite each of the speakers to introduce themselves rather than me introduce them. And then they're going to give a brief summary of their contribution. And then we'll come back to me and then we'll carry on with something else. Okay, so I'm going to start with Freddie. Freddie Bavistock, over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, I'm Dr. Freddie Bavistock. I teach English at Harris Westminster Sixth Form, and I'm a fellow of the English Association. And I kind of got involved with this initiative because I'm not a natural fit, and I like to sort of stretch myself into places where I come, to sort of, I suppose, for CPT reasons, to develop my own practice as a teacher. By nature, I'm a bit of a technophobe, in fact. So, my initial response to AI, as I sort of kind of explained in my article, was one of, I suppose, instinctive withdrawal and kind of mild horror at the idea of another piece of sort of technological kind of capability, kind of colonizing the brains of my students that I'm trying to fill with works of great literature and kind of independent thinking and critical thinking that they develop for themselves. So really, what I put myself the challenge was sort of actually, trying it out. And having heard Darren Coxon speak at an EA event about using Claude Sonnet to set up a three-way conversation between an author, a character, and myself, the user, I put this to the test, and that's what I report back on in my article. And essentially, one of kind of quiet revelation, realizing that, gosh, actually, I really enjoyed doing that. The insights it gave me into the text I was teaching were really useful. And so it gave me a lot of food for thought. Is that enough, Elizabeth, in terms of
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So just going by my screen, moving on to Kate Wiles next. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Kate Wiles, and I am a digital innovation and development coach at Nottingham College. Thank you for having me this evening on this very snowy day in Nottingham. It's been quite tricky to get anywhere. Hope it's better for wherever you guys are coming from today. So my contribution to the article was around Minecraft education. I am the UK ambassador for Minecraft education and game-based learning advocate as a whole. And I did explain how we can actually benefit our English practices through the platform of Minecraft Education, to do with the pedagogy and general kind of lesson engagement, getting bums on seats, and all of the good stuff that's above. So when it comes to AI, because Minecraft Education is built in a way that it is kind of split down into activities. Obviously, AI has been a very hot topic, especially in gamification. We actually have a dedicated handful of activities that are specifically created for our staff and our students to actually explore AI in depth. So it's from whether you're doing prompt crafting or you're actually trying to understand ethical use of AI, Minecraft Education's got it. So yeah, I hope that kind of summarises what I'm here for, and I'd love to hear your questions if you're interested in the platform.
Thank you, Kate, that's great. Okay, and next is Madeleine Champagne.
Hi, yeah, I'm Madeleine Champagne. I teach in an independent school in Battersea in South London, and back in July I began an experiment with our year 8, 9s and 10s, and they essentially there were 6 1.5-hour sessions with 6 different classes comparing human-generated writing, the students' human-generated writing, with AI LLM generated writing. Just to say, we have a security system called Securely, which has its own chats within it. So we don't need parental permission for them to use that, because it's already, you know, part of our security system. So we have been using LLMs in school in lessons. That particular session threw up some really interesting contrasts, and what I hoped was that the students themselves would see the benefits of human generated writing versus AI at that point. That was back in July, and yeah, there were certainly some very interesting results from that. I think the main takeaway for them and for me was that you know, the engineering maxim, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You know, if you're essentially, their own creativity and criticality was very important in terms of what it then produced, and that became very clear. So my intention wasn't to put them off using it. My intention was to open Pandora's box and together as a school. Since then, things have very much moved on a lot and very rapidly, and I'll talk more about those things later. But yeah, that was the gist of the article.
Thanks, Madeleine, that's great. And finally, Lucy McNabb.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy McNabb. I'm from Forward. I've put the blurb about what we are in the chat. We're all about poetry, and we're part of a group of poets, publishers, educators who meet, I want to say, like maybe once or twice or 3 times a year as part of a children's poetry summit to think about poetry and education and children and teaching. And we have been just talking and curious about the advent of AI for quite a while. And there's one poet called Laura Muka who's really been thinking about it and doing a bit of research so that we can try and stay current. And so we just made some films with her that we thought might bring the conversation, which, as you said, Madeleine's already moved on so fast, but might bring the conversation in a really easy to digest way, mainly for kind of 8 to 12-year-olds, I suppose, about poetry and AI. It was kind of prompted by the question of what makes us human. What's the difference between poetry written by a human and poetry created through artificial intelligence? And things like the recent research that I think popped up on my feed yesterday, where some people in, where are we? In Pittsburgh, I think. Have I got Pittsburgh right? Let me post the link in the chat. That poetry written by AI has been rated as better than poems written by humans. Just fascinate me, partly because this is this is big news for all of us, but just to kind of delve into it deeper and not to be alarmist about it. So we've just been playing around discovering And then more broadly using technology to promote a really broad range of what poetry is into the classroom. So thinking about, this is one of the oldest art forms that ever existed, and existed as a spoken art form before it was ever written down. So how can technology help us get the voices of living, dynamic living poets into the English classroom? I'll stop.
Thanks, Lucy. That's brilliant. Yes, I mean, certainly we're in a time of excessive, speedy change when it comes to technology. And even, I mean, a few days ago, the English Association received an email via Freddie and a colleague at Harris Westminster Sixth Form School, James Reardon. He sent us this Google Notebook LM, which some of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with. And what I did with that was I uploaded the English Association's vision and plan onto this platform and asked them to generate a podcast with two chatbots talking to each other about the English Association's vision and plan. And it was, you know, a really wild and interesting experience, because it gave us a summary, it reviewed every single element of our vision and plan, it raised very interesting questions, and there were lots of sort of wow, hey, because it was a Californian accent, and I couldn't find a way of changing the accent of the two chatbots, which I found a bit annoying, but apparently there are other platforms where you can do that. But it offered us a really interesting kind of feedback and summary of our vision and plan, but also raised interesting questions for us based on what we said. But it was really a fascinating experience. So that's just one thing that the English Association has engaged with just in the past few days. What I'm going to do now is Thank you, Becky. That was very interesting technologically. I'm now going to put out some questions that we've asked the speakers to address, which Becky's going to put in the chat, but I'll read them out so that everyone can hear what they are. So the first question is, how do you envision the balance between traditional teaching techniques and new technology like AI in the English classroom? The second question, what has been the most effective teaching strategy or tool you've used to integrate technology in the English classroom? And how has it influenced student learning, engagement, creativity, critical thinking, whatever grabs you? And thirdly, what are some practical steps or resources you would recommend to teachers who are hesitant about integrating technology into the English classroom? Now, we've invited the speakers to respond in any way they wish. They can ignore two of the questions, just focus on one. But again, I'll just follow the same order if that's all right. So if we start with Freddie.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I mean, because again, by nature, I'm a sort of strong believer in traditional teaching techniques for English. You know, it's really rooted, isn't it, in talking and listening, and thinking aloud, and, you know, engaging in dialogue. So in my own practice, I suppose where I've got to is I feel, for example, this year I'm very extensively teaching year 12s. I'm setting them off on quite a, you know, the first half of the term, very traditional techniques, and then slowly introducing them to new ways of approaching things and new ways of doing things. And in fact, next week, I'm going to get them to engage with a little AI exercise for the first time this term. So my feeling is that technology has got its place and can be really useful, but I think with the kind of two caveats, one, which is you need to sort of, I suppose, establish your own culture and expectations. And I think it's extremely important to do in the way that you're comfortable with, and that establish, you know, the primacy, I suppose, of talking and listening and sort of thinking within the classroom without relying on tools, because those tools are not available to students under exam conditions. So we're not really helping them if we make them dependent on them. And then having sort of, I suppose, established that culture of expectations, then to introduce them. And I think for me personally, it's more within the zone of homework than in the classroom itself. I feel like they, you know, AI is a tool which is actually the kind of thing which I think possibly can make homework a little bit more fun, dare I say it, and engaging, and therefore they're more likely to complete it. So that's sort of my feeling around the balance of it. I mean, at the moment, you know, in terms of what's sort of actually integrated into the classroom, I mean, the most successful intervention over the last few years has been Microsoft Teams, which is not in its sort of terribly revolutionary, but is quietly revolutionary. So, for example, I'll give you one practical example which we're using in our school, which is when the year 13s do their coursework, where they're all working on laptops because it has to be typeset and, of course, and submitted digitally. So we've learned that if you can get them to actually upload the document they're working on onto Teams, then the teacher in the room can monitor what they're writing as they're writing it without kind of hovering over their shoulder and kind of pointing at the screen and kind of getting in the way. And that can be a really useful way of having students within one classroom all working quietly while the teacher's able to assess who's struggling and who's making progress and so forth. So that's, you know, again, that's a very small thing, but again, quietly, I think, revolutionary. And in terms of, I'm just going to answer all three of the questions. And in terms of my advice to teachers, I'm not going to hold myself up as a shining example, but I suppose I hopefully the spirit with, you know, of which I'm approaching this, it might be one that inspires people, which is just to experiment and to sort of try things out. I mean, my position in the classroom is not to present myself as an expert, because I don't think that's credible. You know, they know more about technology than I do, but to present myself as someone who's keen to learn with them and to make it a collaborative thing, and then get feedback in terms of, well, what was that like? Did that work? Was that interesting? And sort of, I suppose, you know, evolve our practice together and see what works and what doesn't. That's really, I think, the summary of my position at the moment, and I expect it to change, but that's where I am now.
Thanks, Freddie. That's great. And obviously, if you've got any questions you want to ask, just put them in the chat or at the end. So now over to Kate Wiles.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, just to kind of echo what Freddie's covered there. I'm looking at the balance question, and obviously coming from the perspective of using Minecraft education, it's not all about the platform when we're delivering to our English students. There's an awful lot of research around the subject before you jump into the Minecraft world. So we are still kind of embracing those traditional practices with, not being rude, but a little bit of a sweetener at the end when it comes to actually getting onto that computer and immersing yourself into that lovely Minecraft software. A good example of that is one that I wrote about in the article, where we're trying to celebrate World Book Day. Obviously, huge thing across the country, and we thought, right, we really want to have traditional and non-traditional approach to this, and that's where Minecraft came in, and it was really successful. We covered Roald Dahl, Fantastic Mr. Fox. There was a pre-built activity already created by the Minecraft education developers, which literally embraced the story to a T, really, and it introduced new students to the story, the characters, and the Minecraft world was actually a carbon copy of really what I could imagine was going around Roald Dahl's head when he wrote that fantastic story. And the look on the students' faces was just something so special. But it actually spurred them on to actually get the paper out, get the pen out, read the book, embrace yourself in those characters, create an avatar. Go onto AI, create that avatar. What does Fantastic Mr. Fox look like to you? Is it a fox? Is it real? Is it an AI? Yeah, it throws all these wonderful sort of side questions to our traditional practices. So coming to the most effective teaching strategy, obviously, I think I've covered that in what I've just said, with sort of embracing both of those sort of practices to create something more holistic, really, but that really does kind of create an inclusive environment between our students that really do embrace the more traditional techniques, but also the ones that are really hard to engage. I found that if I am teaching on Minecraft and I don't tell the students exactly what we're going to cover, they will turn up to that lesson because we're teaching on Minecraft. But I think it's super important, and it does sort of bring me into the next question, that it's not all about sitting on Minecraft. It's not all about the tech. It's that blend of what we've got going on there. So how do we get our teachers to embrace this technology? Well, Computer Science Week is just around the corner, and I think that's a really great opportunity for anybody, whether you're involved in computer science or not, to try your hand at what we call an hour of code with Minecraft education. And it literally is just an hour. It's all self-led. Anyone can do it, staff, students, and it does introduce you to the very basics of how the Minecraft education software works and the benefits you can get from it, especially from an English and maths point of view. So I would encourage anybody to give the hour of code a go before you jump straight into the software, and it will give you that gentle introduction to all the fabulous stuff that you can do. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kate. That's great. Madeline, over to you next.
Hi, thank you. This might be a little long because I'll try to be as fast as I can. I do speak very fast anyway. Yeah, firstly, I want to say I just totally agree with Freddie. It's absolutely key that we keep a balance of both skills. That said, I'm opposite to Freddie in that I'm a technophile, very much so, always have been. So the story so far. So since July, the first challenge, of course, I'm head of English. I'm also charged with leading innovation in the school. So the first challenge that we faced was, of course, the problem of potentially students using large language models like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or the millions of others, you know, to write essays. So we had a discussion within the English department, and I would very much encourage all English departments, if you haven't already, to do a quick SWOT analysis, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that we are currently faced with. It feels a lot to me, and I'm sure to others, a bit like COVID, when suddenly we all jumped online over one weekend back in March 2020. We're not a Microsoft school, we're a Google school. So absolutely, yeah, the collab writing on docs has been going since 2020, and we've been carrying on with that for quite a while. We use Google Classroom in a very blended way, sort of in school. We're very fortunate all our students we have a one-to-one Chromebook policy, so all our students have laptops, and I'm fully aware that my colleagues in the state sector, or indeed in other schools, may not have that, but you know, where that is possible, and I would argue that should be possible in every single school, you know, each kid with a Chromebook is as much as important as them having a pen or you know, a laptop of some sort. So yeah, Google Classroom and handwritten work, it's utterly blended, and we continued with that and have been for the last 4 years. So that said, you know, with large language models, we were also very fortunate that our head teacher gave us a 5th teaching hour in year 11. So we've brought all the creative writing in-house. They do it in front of us. So that all of those creative writing homeworks, they don't happen at home anymore. We brought them in front of us. What we've then done is we flipped the learning with a lot of the year 11s. So we're using Masolit videos massively. So they're doing a lot of pre-learning, using a lot of AI to then, they've got their own Gen AI within Masolit, so you can generate quizzes, all sorts of things. They already had quizzes there anyway. So they're pre-learning, they're doing very quick tick and flick homeworks for us. And then the big chunk of marking we're doing is the creative writing that they're doing in situ in front of us. That also then doubles up as exam practice and all sorts of other useful things. And we can go around the room and do the usual kind of live marking. With year 9 and year 11, I've written my own prompt script for them to use. So, for example, year 9 did a massive piece of travel writing, everyone online. I then asked them to all, obviously that's in Google Classroom with the plagiarism checker and all that switched on. But they largely do that in front of us, a bit like a piece of coursework. But then I asked them to shove that into the Securely Chat, which is very similar to ChatGPT. I gave them with both at 9 and 11, essentially, I've given them a prompt script with things like, you know, tell me how I can improve the descriptive writing in this section, or tell me how I can, you know, can you spot any common spelling errors that I'm doing, and, you know, asking it to actually use to spot patterns in the spellings and to obviously use the kind of do the maths on their spelling, as a technical check as well. Sorry, I'm just kind of trying to open the thing myself, but forget it, I'll just tell you about it. Oh yeah, this is it. I gave them the whole of the AO6, which you might be familiar with, is a spelling, punctuation, grammar and vocab assessment objective for GCSE. Dump the whole of that into it, mark it for me, give me a grade, and then I've given them the script. Then I've said to them, read its comments, remembering it may not give the same mark as a human, it may give a different mark each time. You can then ask it further questions. I'll just give you a few examples. Teach me how to improve sentence structures. Is there a pattern in my spelling errors? Simplify the feedback so that I have 3 clear goals, because often it gives pages and pages. Or mark it more harshly, or what steps should I take to improve my writing by just 1 or 2 marks? What would I have to do to get 16 out of 16? Then massive caveat, remember the AI is not a teacher nor an examiner, it doesn't mark in the same way. It might give you a different mark if you put it in the exact same piece of writing again. So things like that, with loads of caveats, and of course a bit of metacognition afterwards. Reflect, to what extent did this help me to progress? Are there better prompts I could ask? What did I notice about my own learning process? Was this helpful for me? Do I need to dig deeper, etc., etc.? I will speed up, I promise. And then other things we have done more recently, we've used loads of Gen AI in JSTOR has its own beta trial now of Gen AI, which you can use that with year 12 and 13. One of my year 13s is actually doing English A level, profoundly dyslexic. So it's really helpful for her to get the AI in JSTOR to summarize these massively dense, as you know, extremely academic articles for her, just so she can work out, well, actually, is this article going to talk about the theme that I need to figure out, or am I going to spend 2 hours reading something I don't actually need, bless her. And yeah, there's a lot more we could say. I've just produced a text using a large language model as a personal tutor for War of the Worlds revision, and I'm just refining that at the moment. And we will be using Top Marks AI to mark some of our mocks with us, and we'll be using that as a sort of moderation exercise. So we know all of this with very much the traditional techniques still going on as well. So I'll stop there, but there's actually quite a lot more. Sorry.
Thank you, Madeline. That was action-packed and lots of interesting tips that people might want to follow on with you in the chat. Okay, thank you. Lucy, over to you.
Oh, thank you. I feel a little imposter because I am not in the English classroom. And I guess I would just offer a few thoughts just to help people kind of engage with it in a sort of take a step back perspective. One of the biggest things that matters to us in our industry, in the creative industries, is the creative skills of English students and well, children coming up through education. And particularly if we are looking and fast forwarding to a world where a lot of content, books, films, plays, music can be created by machines, then does it then become more about the pleasure in the process of creating and enjoying that as a uniquely human experience? And how can we bring that enjoyment and that pleasure in the process into the English classroom to fit our students out to kind of value creativity for its own sake? I also was really struck by what Freddie said about how fast the students in our classrooms will be compared to dinosaurs like me, but you know, people who use this and are very, very adept with it. One of the projects we're doing at the moment is just testing out in 7 schools in Barking and Dagenham, is something that's youth-led. So a poetry, we're calling it Poet Laureates, but a poetry collective in a school, completely led and directed by the students. And you know, that I think is what has been possible to do, is to connect and create a community they use Teams, whatever you use. And I suppose that's another opportunity for us, is to think about the communities in the world outside our physical buildings and how we might connect with them and build that kind of sense of empowerment among our young people to connect. And through that, we've been super conscious of not wanting to design anything that would put anyone at a disadvantage because even because they didn't have the hardware, but because they didn't have the cost of the data in their family, or they didn't have the resources at home that would make it possible for them to join in and be part of these communities. And then I talked, I think, about where this all started for us, which was around the ethics of writers. I don't know if you remember way back in like the early part of this year, when a lot of writers went online and said that our writing has been harvested without our knowledge or permission. And we run something called National Poetry Day every year, which is, we get it sponsored by the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, but they are, just so you know, I think they are advocating for that, throughout government. But the reason they wanted to get in front of young people and teachers is to kind of help students understand their rights as a creator. So to start having those kind of ethical conversations, and copyright is not something you think of putting in the English classroom, but maybe those sorts of ethical considerations would be good conversations to have. And then I will finish just on something really, really joyful, and I'll put a link in the chat, which was that our most effective use of tech has been something really simple, which is just using Zoom. Last October, we did a Guinness World Record attempt for the largest ever poetry lesson, and I think 150,000 children and young people took part in it, and it resulted in a really gorgeous poem. And so just that, going back to that very, very simple experience of lockdown, and how awful it was in so many ways, but how it again opened up the walls and made it possible to get 150,000 people in the same room to create something together.
Absolutely brilliant. What a joyful way to end, as you said, Lucy. How fantastic. Well, thank you very much for all your contributions. There's clearly a lot going on, and one of the things I'm also interested in is the extent to which in the English classroom there are conversations happening with young people about the fact that these chat bots, these AI generators, are not human. They don't have feelings, they don't get ambiguity, they don't get nuance, and how important it is for all of us to engage in conversations with young people about the ethical questions around it, and about that whole thing about not believing everything that they're telling you. So I just wanted to put that out there. But opening up to everybody, do people want to raise their hands, ask questions, make their own comments about technology in the English classroom? We'd love to hear from you. So just opening up the floor, if you can call it a floor, or any of the speakers if they want to say any more. Freddie?
Yes, I was going to say there's something I didn't mention, which I think is worth reflecting on, is there was some very interesting, I can't remember where I read it. So that's a very contemporary problem, isn't it? You read these things, you can't remember the source. But I read an interesting piece of research which revealed that a lot of young people would rather talk to AI about their emotional problems than a therapist. And I think that's very relevant to what we do in English, because a lot of the stuff that we cover in the classroom is quite emotive. And sometimes part of what inhibits students is actually their emotional engagement with the material, which they don't want to talk about. So there is a space here within their privacy of their own bedrooms or kitchens, wherever they're doing their work, to actually engage with that material in a kind of private and yet reflective way. And I think the thing that I found so fascinating, sort of talking to AI myself, or setting it up to have conversations with me, is what it teaches me about myself. So while it may not necessarily be nuanced, it can ask extremely sharp and pertinent questions based on what you tell it. And so the more honest you are with it, and sort of open about what you're struggling with, what you're trying to figure out, it can really help you think things through. And I confess I'm a little bit of a convert to that now. I've realized that because you, in a sense, there's no one looking over your shoulder, and you can just ask the most stupid questions or say the most, brutally honest thing to it. And they'll help you clarify your own thinking.
Do you mind if I jump in and add to that? Is that okay? Another great example, which I haven't quite done it yet, but I've begun to put in my prompts with some of my students. But I had a very long, extremely academic conversation with Claude AI about a Barthian analysis of, I can't remember, something or other, of AI itself, actually. So it got very meta. And it was responding to me with such high academic vocabulary that I felt my vocabulary having to go up and up and up. And it was also, as you know, when you've had chats with LLMs, it's always so exciting. It says, "Oh, that's a brilliant analysis. You're so clever." And I was thinking, "Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, thanks." And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we get the students to do the same thing? So I think what I'm going to plan next is, the next time I give them a bit of text to revise or something, say, okay, plug that into Securely Chat. It'll have to be in school. And then get it to talk to you about the text, and also ask it to improve your vocabulary at the same time, because they're always so positive. It's not going to snark at them in the same way that we might do as an English teacher. Don't use that sort of slang. It might say, "Yeah, that's great," and how about, so that's my next plan, is to get them to talk to it about the texts and also ask it to improve vocab too.
Okay, thank you. Has Fiona McManus.
Hi, I'm so enjoying listening to you all, just to say so. I'm not actually in school per se. I've been in school previously. I'm a lecturer in TESOL and linguistics. I'm really interested in innovation. I loved, Madeline, what you were saying. It's something we're looking at. So I'm teaching, I hope, the next generation of language teachers. And the sort of thing that we've been looking at is that idea of the prompts and using it, something like AI, as a tool that changing the rhetoric, that this is not going to help you write an essay per se. This is something at its most simplistic, a bit like using spell check, something like that. And the students are really, really keen to apply that. And one thing I've done is I teach materials development. So asking them, okay, you need to write, if it's a reading comprehension, the input text. So once you've written it, how can you use the AI? And like you, Madeline, what we've done is we've set up, actually, within their assignment, they have to put in a table that shows the source, the prompts, the changes. So it's a complete review of how they're going to work. I love the flipped classroom, because I think that puts another spin. But I would add in my innovations module. What I found really interesting was that when I said innovation, when my students are first sort of brainstorm off it, they went way beyond just a digital. They were looking at a much wider way of being innovative. And also what did come up, not just the digital poverty aspect, but for them, if they decide to teach somewhere where there isn't internet, where there isn't the ability to use some of these things, then how innovation could look. And so, from what you've all been saying, I would suggest it's not one or the other. It's, we've got some really interesting tools. How can we start to use them to educate also our learners and how they can use them? Which is, I'm hoping that when my students do put things into practice, that I hope that's something they can bring to it. Plus, I learn from them, as you said, all the time. Holy moly, they know so much tech and digital. So it's really interesting to then see what we're doing in school as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Yes, I mean, just to conclude, absolutely, as Kate was saying, it's about embracing the traditional approaches and the non-traditional in the English classroom. And, as you've all been saying, it's about collaboration with your students and with the teacher, because they often know a hell of a lot more than we do. And also blending, as again Kate was talking about when she's talking about Minecraft, about blending tech with all the other tricks in our teaching bags. I like the idea of Computer Science Week that Kate mentioned. I don't know when that is, but that's something for us to look out for. And as Freddie was saying, it's about experimenting as well, with all sorts of things, and engaging with each other. I mean, really glad the English Association has had this conversation and generated this conversation authentically without AI. Also, actually, some people did use AI, didn't they, in the newsletter input? But this is the first of many conversations that I'm sure are going on all over the country and all over the world, and we look forward to further progressing this. So I'll finish there and hand back to Becky.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, we will share this recording with you later this week, so you can continue to come back to it and listen to all these ideas again. Do feel free to share it with your networks and your colleagues. We're very happy for you to do that. And we're always looking for other things that you would like us to focus on in these Twilight CPD events. So if there is anything you would like us to cover, please do just drop me a line. I'm ceo@englishassociation.ac.uk, and I'd be very happy to hear from any of you with things that you would like to see. So I'll let you go to your evenings, and thank you very much for coming along, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.